Good morning, everybody. It is that time again in Madison, Wisconsin. And it somehow snowed again. I was talking to some folks and saying, they were saying like 6 inches maximum. You realize that you've acclimated a bit to the north whenever you're saying, 6 inches max, like nothing we haven't seen before. And then, it just over the span of like 4 hours just dumped it all on us. So that was a fun thing to wake up to, but also you're looking at the calendar like, didn't the groundhog say spring should have been here like last week? Like, come on. Yeah, no kidding. But that's Wisconsin for you.
Yeah, I was, when we lived in Madison, there was 1 year when on April 11th, we got a foot of snow.
Wow.
It was melting as fast as it was coming down.
Right. Yeah. But just that late.
Yeah.
Of course, last winter it wasn't necessarily bad. It just the chill stuck around till like May.
Yeah.
So that was odd. But yeah, we didn't get a whole lot of snow that winter. But
That's spring in Wisconsin.
exactly.
My kids used to wear coats till school was out.
Yeah.
So if you're looking for a nice season in Wisconsin, go for fall.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yep. We're 3 years in to being in Wisconsin, so we feel like we're acclimating a little bit. But then there's always something new that surprises us. It's like, well, you experienced this kind of winter in Wisconsin, but wait till you experience this kind of winter. It's good. Keeps us on our toes. The nature that the Lord made truly is something wild and amazing and cool to behold.
Yeah.
And on that note, let's get into the Bible. We are still in our study of Isaiah Part 2. We are going to be starting in chapters 46 and also getting into chapter 47 in our second half. But first, we're going to start in chapter 46, Isaiah 46. And we're going to look at the first 7 verses of chapter 46. The lesson this week was entitled The Idols of Babylon. And kind of a continuation of the lesson from last week, which was Idols Are Worthless. So we've kind of categorized, idols and the fact that they are worthless. But also now the Lord and Isaiah want to really make a comparison between the idols of Babylon and the Lord. What are the differences? What really sets the Lord himself apart from these statues, these idols, these things that the Babylonians have made for themselves? So let's start in verse 1. Let's read verses 1 through 4. Someone will read the first 4 verses of chapter 46.
Bel bows down, Nebo stoops. Their idols were on the feast on the cattle. Your carriages were heavily loaded, a burden to the weary beast. They stooped, they bow down together. They could not deliver the burden, but had themselves gone into captivity. Listen to me, O house of Jacob, and all the remnant of the house of Israel, who have been upheld by me from birth, who have been carried from the womb. Even to your old age I am he, and even to gray hairs I will carry you. I have made, and I will bear, even I will carry, and will deliver you.
Thank you. So, we get 2 verses of what idols do, and we get 2 verses of what the Lord has done. He says, Bel bows down, Nebo stoops low. Bel and Nebo are 2 what would be kind of considered like the head of all the gods of these Eastern religions. Bel we kind of talked about last week whenever we talked about Bel and the dragon. That was the statue that was supposedly eating all the food that they left in the temple, and Daniel quickly proved that it wasn't the statue, it was just the priests of this statue that wanted people to think that the statue was a god. So that was kind of the Bel that we talked about. But yeah, Bel and Nebo would be considered the equivalent to Zeus in the Greek mythology, any like lord above the gods, like the head god. So we see that the Lord talks about these would be the big gods of Israel living in Babylon would know who Bel and Nebo are. They would have heard those names very commonly. And yet here we see them bowing down, stooping low. The idols are borne by, or it even says of, beasts of burden. The images they carried around are burdensome, a burden for the weary. Just a comparison here, it talks about how the idols are not helping anything. The idols aren't making things better for the people who worship them. They're not, you know, boosting their cardio or making them stronger or anything like that. They're actively weighing down the people who worship them. They are burdensome, a burden for the weary. They stoop and bow down together, unable to rescue the burden. They themselves go off into captivity. These idols, again, they are stooping. They are bowing down themselves, even though they are meant to be things that you are to bow down to. And they themselves go off into captivity. The idols have to have their particular spot in their temples. They have to be sitting on a particular pedestal. They have to be carried around on a very particular, I can't remember the thing where they carry it on their shoulders, but the idols need their space. They have to be in this one contained area for them to work effectively. Heavy, heavy, heavy quotations. And yet, the Lord is completely the opposite. He says, "Listen to me, you descendants of Jacob, for whom I have upheld since your birth. I have carried you from the day you were born. Even to your old age, gray hairs, I am he. I am he who will sustain you. I have made you, and I will carry you. I will sustain you, and I will rescue you." The Lord does not need a physical embodiment of himself to properly help the Israelites. He lets them know, and he's kind of having to remind them because they have been in captivity for 70 years at this point in Babylon. But even so, he's telling them, these idols, these statues, need to be carried around by the people that worship them. They need to be placed in their proper place. They need to be carried in a certain way, or else, they will become angry and they won't help the people who worship them anymore. But the Lord says, I have been with you. I have upheld you since birth. Literally, from the first day that you come out of the womb to the last day where your hairs are old and gray, I will sustain you, and I will carry you, and I will rescue you. We see the difference that idols in this world were nothing but a burden to those who carried them. It might give them some personal peace of mind. That was kind of the point of idols. It wasn't necessarily, the ultimate focus wasn't to actually have this magical statue that helped you defeat your enemies. It was made by people who wanted some kind of peace of mind to explain how the world was what it is. They wanted to be able to focus their attention, their questions about the world into this idol that, in their own minds, answered their questions in odd and ways that literally couldn't be explained, didn't make logical sense. But it was an attempt by those who didn't know the Israelite God to explain how the world was. And so they put up this statue so that the people would come and pray to it, and that way they could, whenever good things happen, they could say, yes, this idol has blessed us. This is because we gave gold to the statue, or because we carried the statue around the town 7 times, or something like that. Whereas here, the Lord states that I don't need offerings, I don't need anything like that, I only need for you to listen to me. Because whether or not you believe it, I am with you from your first day to your last day. And so let's continue on with verses 5 and let's go through 7. We'll kind of finish that whole thought, verses 5 through 7.
To whom would you liken me and make me equal and compare me, that we would be alike? Those who lavish gold from the purse and weigh silver on the scale, hire a goldsmith, and he makes it into a god. They bow down indeed, they worship it. They lift it up on the shoulder and carry it. They set it on its place, and it stands there. It does not move from its place. Though one may cry to it, it cannot answer. It cannot deliver him from his distress.
Thank you. So there we have it, kind of restated again. The Lord is saying, what can you compare me to? The people here, they go out, they weigh all their gold and silver, they see how much they have, and then they have someone make that gold into a little statue. In this case, they've actively lost money so that they can have a little token that they can try and wrap their minds around divinity with. They set it in its place, there it stands, and from that spot it cannot move. We talked last week about how the gods of the Eastern religions had to be in their one place because that was, wherever that idol was, that was the designated area of blessing. If the idol was taken away from that spot, there was no more blessing. The people didn't have that god anymore. If it was removed, it was powerless. We know it was powerless anyway, but isn't that frightening? To have some source of power that is so easily taken away that if you pick up this little statue and move it somewhere else, suddenly you're completely cut off from the power of that god.
Caleb, it makes me think of a coworker who had gone through a house fire, and after getting through the whole trauma of it and losing everything and starting over, she came to the realization and revelation about what she was idling in her life, and the things that she was devastated by losing ended up not being what really mattered in the end when she finally got through the trauma and saw what God was blessing her with in the end, and who matters most,
Right.
her faith in Him and everything. So I think about that and all the stuff we collect and say has meaning to us.
Yeah.
If it went away or if something happened to her, how would we react? So that just made me think of where we put our weight on
Yeah.
things like the world.
Well, I'm going to kind of say an example. We always, when we talk about fire safety, we always talk about don't grab anything, just get out of the house and go. But what oftentimes do we do? Do we make little backup plans? Like, okay, if there is a fire, I'm going to make sure to grab this and this and this on my way out. We try and make the exit journey of a fire as efficient as possible so we can get all the things that are most important. We've always talked about, grabbing the dogs. And like that's like on the border of like, those are living things, but again, yeah, then, when you're a little kid, like, oh, I'm gonna grab my Game Boy or I'm gonna grab my favorite book or something like that. And even though we grow into adults, there's still some importance left on things. Whereas we're looking at it, it's the comparison of a literal life versus something that sits on a shelf or gives you a little bit of entertainment daily. But yeah, then when you have to like sit down and give a hard thought to what is actually like the important things that are around me. In Oklahoma, it's very not uncommon. Whenever a tornado comes through, like a bad tornado, it'll level houses. And so a common practice that I did many, many times throughout my growing up was going through the wreckage of a house and just trying to find anything that would be important to the owner. Going through and being like, hey, do you want to try and salvage this? Do you want to try and salvage this? And oftentimes it wasn't like anyone in particular, it wasn't someone we knew. We would just send, as many folks as we could to go help out with anyone whose house had been knocked down by the tornado. And so we often get, lots and lots of perspectives of people that, any little thing, any, thing that was still functioning, that could still work, pile it up and we'll make sure and take it to a new place. There were some people that only wanted things with sentimental value, pictures, scrapbooks, anything that might, remind them of what's important. And then, every once in a while, you would get someone who would just say, it's gone. Like, the tornado took it, it's leveled. If there, like I said, if there was like a pet or something like that, we would go and look for it. But it was always, harrowingly refreshing to see someone who was looking at literally a house they spent thousands of dollars on, to be standing in front of it and go, I made it out, everyone who was important to me made it out. This is a bummer, but I'm not going to try and dig through useless pieces of wood and rubble to try and save some semblance of what I think is important. And so that's what came to mind, whenever you talked about that, was knowing the importance of, your life, the people who you love, and things like that in the face of destruction and danger. The Israelites would have seen a very similar kind of thing with the initial siege of Jerusalem. Seeing a city that they've lived in that is, the seat of the Judean kingdom. being burned down, and all they basically get to take is their loved ones who made it through the siege and march themselves off to a new land. And that, that would be hard. With, God foretelling all the destruction, to have the peace of mind to go, okay, well, I'm still here, my family's still here, it's, the people that I love, I still have that around me, so that's a blessing in itself. It would be a hard mindset to take, yeah.
I was gonna say, our faith is what gets us through it all. It's something that can't be taken away from us. God doesn't burn, he doesn't blow away in the wind, he doesn't decay, he doesn't rot, he's always there.
And yeah, faith is the crux of this whole situation. The Israelites didn't have faith to start off this whole debacle. They had moved on to idols, to the very things that the Lord is reminding them is like, remember, these are worthless. Because this is what got y'all into the situation in the first place. You turned away from my word, you started worshiping other idols, other gods. And so, yeah, they've gone into exile, and they've gone to Babylon, and now they're fixing to go to the kingdom of Cyrus. And the Lord is just, these are timely reminders of these people also put all their hope into their things, into their physical things, and now watch as one kingdom after another, they crumble because I have foretold it. Yeah, any other thoughts? All right. So, moving on to chapter 47. In our last study, in last week's study, the Lord directly talked to Cyrus of Persia, the new conqueror of the kingdom, was going to sweep through Babylon, was going to tear it down and bring the Israelites to a new kingdom. And, he talked to Cyrus and said, I give you power even though you don't recognize me, even though you don't worship me, like my people, the Israelites. I give you power because I have foretold it. Like, he wanted Cyrus to be aware that the only reason that he was being so successful, that he was on top of the world, was because the Lord had proclaimed that it would be so. And now we see him address the kingdom of Babylon, which Cyrus has or is fixing to sweep through, destroy, and take the Israelites out of. The Israelites have been in Babylon for a long, long time. You remember the stories of Daniel, King Nebuchadnezzar. King Nebuchadnezzar has been long dead at this point. And so now, as the Israelites go from Babylon to the kingdom of Cyrus, or the Chaldeans, I believe is what they're called, Chaldeans, we're going to see basically the Lord remind Babylon, you got your power because of me, and now it's time that you did not respect me, so now it's time for the next stage of all that I have proclaimed to happen. So, starting in verse 1, let's go through verse 4.
Come down and sit in the dust, O virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, O daughter of the Chaldeans. For you shall no longer be called tender and delicate. Take the millstones and grind meal. Remove your veil, strip off the skirt. Uncover the leg, cross the rivers. Your nakedness will be uncovered, your shame also will be exposed. I will take vengeance and will not spare a man. O Redeemer, the Lord of hosts is his name, the Holy One of Israel.
Thank you. So, we see now Babylon was the benefactor of being a part of the Lord's prophecy, and now they are on the receiving end of the destruction and wrath that is part of Israel's exile. Go down and sit in the dust, virgin daughter of Babylon. Sit on the ground without a throne, queen city of the Babylonians. Babylon had all these things. They had great statues they had built. They had conquered Israel, and they were sitting pretty, to use an ism. But now we see that the time has come that now they are laid to waste. Just as the Israelites were told, now destruction is coming. You'll be made like a shack, an empty shack in an empty field. And now we see that not a single person in Babylon has anywhere to sit. There is no throne, there is no high place. It says, go down, sit in the dust. There's not even flooring now that Cyrus has completely razed the city of Babylon. Historically, it was talked about that the city of Babylon was in a very particular place, that it would have been seen as very difficult to conquer just because of how it was built, the geographical location. Does this sound familiar at all? People thought that Jerusalem was a very powerful and hard to conquer city. It was located near the top of cliffs and mountaintops. It would be very difficult to conquer. And yet what happened? It was conquered. Because the Lord said so. And here we see the exact same thing is happening to the Babylonians. Not because necessarily no reason at all. God is fixing to say, you did not show my people respect. You did not show me respect. And so we see another kingdom that thinks it's in a safe spot because of all the things they've built up, all the things that protect them, their walls, the ground around them is somehow going to protect them from the will of the Lord. But as we see is told, there is no protection. Sorry, did you have your hand up, Patsy?
Well, I was just thinking about Nebuchadnezzar, you know, a long time ago, he got this too.
Yep. And for a while there, yeah. He showed respect to the Lord because of everything that had happened. But like we said, now Nebuchadnezzar has been dead for quite a while. And it seems that the Babylonians, just like the Israelites, have completely turned away from what they knew, from what they had seen with their own eyes, from what the king of the land had told them. This Lord has the power. I have seen things that are physically impossible. And yet they happened. But then as soon as that voice of reason was taken away, they turned right back to the idols, right back to the things that have gotten all the people related to the Israelites in trouble. And so, just a fun little historical side note, the reason that Babylon was thought to be so difficult to conquer was it was a well-fortified city, but also you had to cross a river that ran along the city. And, to get an army across that river would be difficult because either you took a bridge that was controlled by the country that had the city, or you had to actually march through the water with a bunch of armor and chariots and things like that would be very, very difficult. But Cyrus, in his, wisdom imbued by God, literally Cyrus had the river upstream blocked off. He dammed the river that was protecting the city of Babylon so he could march his entire army right up to the city without having to face any kind of resistance. That would have been a Herculean task to literally stop a river. At that time, we think about our modern engineering today, it would take a couple of days, but we could get it done pretty quick to stop a river. In biblical times, literally laying a brick by brick against the flow of a river, you would essentially have to dig out an area so that the flow of the river was interrupted, isn't quite as strong, and then build a stoppage to keep it from moving any further. And most armies, most leaders of that time wouldn't think that worth the time. And yet, Cyrus did it anyway. Because this is just another step in the Lord's plan of the Israelites' exile. So that's just a fun little side note there. But again, we're seeing these great cities, heavily fortified, are conquered by forces that shouldn't really probably be able to do that by earthly standards. And yet, we know that this isn't all happening by earthly standards. And so continuing on in chapter 47, sit in silence, go into darkness, queen city of the Babylonians. No more will you be called queen of kingdoms. I was angry with my people and desecrated my inheritance. I gave them into your hand, and you showed them no mercy. Even on the aged, you laid a very heavy yoke. You said, I am forever the eternal queen, but you did not consider these things or reflect on what might happen. Sit in silence, go into darkness. The Lord is letting them know your time is up. You were on borrowed time to begin with, and you did nothing with it. The Lord is letting the Babylonians know, you only conquered my people because I was angry with my people. I desecrated my own inheritance. The Lord is saying, you didn't interrupt my plan. You were just the benefactors of the fact that I needed to teach my people a lesson. I gave them into your hand, and you showed them no mercy. Even on the aged, you laid a very heavy yoke. Here we see that the Babylonians are taking advantage of the weak. They are taking a people who are already completely at rock bottom, have lost everything except their own lives, and yet find ways to make it more difficult on the Israelites. And if there's anything that we've read, even in our first part of a study of Isaiah, the Lord does not think highly of those who take advantage of the weak. One of the last chapters we read in our first part of the Isaiah study was one of the woe-tos. Woe to you who make unfair laws. Woe to you who take advantage of the oppressed. Woe to you who put a heavy yoke on the aged and the weak. And yet, what do they say after making things difficult for the Israelites? They say, I am forever. The Babylonians say, I am the eternal queen. But the Lord says, but you did not consider these things or reflect on what might happen. The Babylonians had no consideration for what their actions would bring. They just saw that they were successful. They saw that they had just conquered a more powerful kingdom. They had just raided all the riches from another temple. They had more money. They had more glory. They had more fame for their own names. And as they kicked the Israelites further into the dust, they didn't think about what kind of repercussions this could have. Now then, listen, you lover of pleasure, lounging in your security, and saying to yourself, I am, and there is none besides me. I will never be a widow or suffer the loss of children. Both of these will overtake you in a moment, on a single day, loss of children and widowhood. They will come upon you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and all your potent spells. We'll get into the sorcery spells thing, but first I want to go back to verse 8. Now listen, you lover of pleasure, lounging in your security, and saying to yourself, I am, there is none besides me. Specifically that line, I am, there is none besides me. We know there is an I am with a capital A. And yet here the Babylonians are claiming to be the one and true power above everything else. They are deifying themselves. The Babylonians as a people are making themselves out to be a divine power. They tell themselves, they tell everyone who will listen, I am, there is none besides me. I am forever the eternal queen. They say, I will never be a widow or suffer the loss of children. And the Lord in the very next verse, both of these things will happen to you. Not just over time. What does it say? In a moment, on a single day, you will lose your children and you will lose your husbands. That is losing everything. Maybe except your own life, but at that point, in that time, that would be the equivalent of losing everything. They will come on you in full measure, in spite of your many sorceries and all your potent spells. The Lord is reminding Babylon, despite all your securities, all the things that you have that you think protect you, they will be taken away in a moment. And that statement to anyone besides the Israelites would sound absolutely wacky. But the Israelites hearing this prophecy being foretold, what are they probably thinking right now? This might just be happening. Because a lot of the younger generation of Israelites might not remember the conquering of Jerusalem, but the older folks, the folks that have made the trek up to Babylon after being conquered, they would recognize this is sounding real familiar, y'all. This is starting to tickle something in my brain. I remember this same guy coming to talk to us. Hey, security isn't going to save you. There's going to be a kingdom that's going to come and conquer you. And we all kind of laughed at him. And now look at us. And so the Israelites are probably going, hey, should probably listen to this guy. But historically, as we know, do they? No. In spite of your many sorceries and your potent spells, you have trusted in your wickedness, and have said, no one sees me. Your wisdom and knowledge mislead you, when you say to yourself, I am, and there is none besides me. Disaster will come upon you, and you will not know how to conjure it away. A calamity will fall upon you that you cannot ward off with a ransom. A catastrophe you cannot foresee will suddenly come upon you. And now we get into the Lord foretelling a prophecy of destruction. It's interesting to think about. He talks about many sorceries and potent spells. In the book, it kind of likens to the wise men, the 3 wise men who come from the east to be at Jesus' birth. The kingdoms of the east were very confident in their abilities to foretell prophecies based on the stars in the sky. They were very big on astrology. They thought that because they were able to map out the stars, to pinpoint certain areas in the sky, that somehow equated them to magic. And so part of why the 3 wise men came from the east was because of the star that appeared in the sky when Jesus was born. They saw this new star, this new thing that they thought they had completely mapped out. And probably to them, the appearance of a new star was probably a sign of some god, letting them know that there was going to be something big happening. And yet here we see that you have trusted in your wickedness and have said, no one sees me. The wisdom and the false security in their powers and their walls will bring disaster. A calamity will fall upon you that you cannot ward off with a ransom. A catastrophe you cannot foresee will suddenly come upon you. The people who thought they could foretell the happenings of the earth based on the sky will have a calamity that they cannot foresee. Because they're divining all the happenings of the world from the sky. They might be looking up, but they're not looking to the Lord, are they? They're putting their faith in the things that they can see, that they can tangibly measure, that they can look up and find the different shapes and go, yes, that means there will be rain tomorrow, or we are safe because, these 3 stars are lined up in a particular way. Except the Lord says no. There is no foretelling this. There is no way you can ward off this calamity. Because just like the Israelites did at the beginning of all this exile, they said, nothing bad can happen to us. I am above any powers that might come and try and knock me down. I have built up walls. I have made weapons. And even if that's not enough, the Babylonians are even saying, I can tell exactly what's going to happen by looking at the sky. I know magic. I am able to ward off any bad things that might happen. But the Lord lets them know exactly what's going to happen. That the destruction that comes cannot be foreseen. And as the story goes, Cyrus comes through, blocks the river, comes and conquers a city that was thought unconquerable. And all these things happen to show the Israelites, I am the Lord. I am the one who makes things happen. I am the one who has the power. I give power, and I take away power. And now they've seen two great kingdoms that have been completely reduced to rubble because the Lord has foretold it. And that's the sad part, that all this could be avoided if the people being spoken to just listened. The Word of God has been proven over centuries that it is true. That even though we do not have, the Lord foretelling that these kingdoms will rise anymore, we still have the Word of the Lord, the Bible, that assures us that He is always with us. In chapter 46, He says, "From the day you were born to the day you die, I am with you. I carry you." We see all the idols that are described have to be placed somewhere. They have to be picked up and moved. But on the opposite side of the coin, the Lord is always carrying us. Maybe in directions that we don't understand yet, maybe to places that we haven't seen before, but the Lord is always there guiding us. And though we go through difficulties, though we go through hardships, we know that the Lord is still there with us, always wanting us to learn a lesson, to realize that, in a minor way, sometimes we get a little bit of the hard love treatment, that we need to lose those worldly things to realize my value was misplaced. My value needs to be in the Lord. Yeah.
Yeah, this passage here, at the very beginning, we get the image of an untouchable princess of Babylon being reduced to being a slave girl, basically, right? And then the idea of having to gird her skirt or hike up her clothes to be taken away from Babylon in captivity, right? Then at the end, and when you get to this part, it really sparked a thought in me, where verse 8, who says in your heart, I am. Yeah, comparing themselves to God. I am untouchable, right? That led me to Romans 12, verse 3. For through the grace given to me, I say to everyone among you, not to think more highly of himself than he ought to think, but to think so as to have sound judgment, as God has allotted to each a measure of faith. And if you back up the two verses right before that, therefore I urge you, brethren, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies a living and holy sacrifice, acceptable to God, which is your spiritual service of worship. And do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, so that you may prove what the will of God is, that which is good and acceptable and perfect. And that's the thing that the Babylonians were missing there. They were untouchable. They were on top of everything. They were in command. But the reality is, God is in command. We should never put ourselves in that place. We should never think more highly of ourselves than God. And we should be living sacrifices. We should be transformed and willing to give everything up in order to serve God. So
Yeah.
I just love the way that ties together.
Yeah. The kings of those kingdoms were given power, were given the support of the Lord.
It all
And yet-
came from God.
Exactly. And yet, instead of realizing this and, changing their ways to be an instrument of the Lord's will, they lifted themselves up. They tried to put themselves on equal grounds with God. They said, yes, I have done these things. By my sword, by my hand, I have made myself into the king of the world. And that always leads to, nope, time to get knocked down a peg. Because the Lord is the I am. As the Babylonians said, I am forever, the eternal queen, the Lord says, nope, I am forever. I am the eternal king. But you did not consider these things or reflect on what might happen. Yeah. So, in the way that the Israelites turned away from the word of the Lord, in the same way that the Babylonians, despite getting riches and glory from the will of the Lord, they did not listen to the word of the Lord. They moved on as quickly as they could, saying, yes, now I am the best thing ever. So let's remember that if we ever start feeling a bit too big for our britches, let's remember to go back to that verse that John just read in Romans, to give our bodies as a living sacrifice to the Lord, to make sure that we are the instrument of the Lord's will, and we don't try and go off on our own path, and in doing so cut ourselves off from God's will. Any other last thoughts?
Stay grounded.
Stay grounded. Not to the literal ground, but to the holy ground, the Bible. Well, good stuff. We're a few minutes early, but not too early. But thank you all for a wonderful class, and looking forward to next week.